Come on.
Hello, everybody. We're going to give this just a couple minutes. We're early at this point. There was a little confusion at our previous meeting, which ran right to the wire. So we want to give everybody a chance to jump from the last meeting to the new one and to determine from Charmaine when she comes on, whether or not we're going to be able, whether or not there'll be a presentation by the developer. If not, this meeting will be much shorter because we'll only focus on the one issue.
You there?
Yeah.
I can't hear anything.
Hey, everybody, can we hear? Buzz, sound?
Quite the meeting.
Yeah.
33 people.
You should have been at the last one, Peter.
I was right at the end, 62.
I feel like I have meeting envy. Can everybody hear all right?
Yep.
Are we online? Okay, I want to thank you all for coming today. First of all, we have Charmaine. We're just going
Danae
to
is
give a
trying to
moment.
log on. Oops.
Okay, I just want to mention, with apologies, we're going to wait just a couple more minutes. The previous meeting was very dramatic and there were a lot of folks. And so we're running just a few minutes late because we would like everybody to have a chance to get out of the previous meeting and log on to this one.
And Danae,
June,
Danae will
could
be
you
logging
run
in.
me over a glass of that wine, please?
I'm in for the night. Sorry, Philip.
So once again, with everybody's patience, I would appreciate if you just give us a couple more minutes to see who pops on.
Danae should be trying to log in any minute.
Okay. So before we, officially start the meeting, I will remind you all that we do have city officials here. I do see Eva. Thank you so much, Eva from Code Enforcement. And what we're going to attempt to do is expedite so that these dedicated public servants can get home to their families. So we're going to try to keep it simple, but I'll explain how we're set up the meeting in just a few minutes.
Philip, is your family okay in Florida?
They're in Tampa and Clearwater, and I can't reach them. So they're probably hunkered down. Thanks for asking. I'll take the, I wish we had none of it, but it's getting wet over there, even in Fort Lauderdale where my sister lives. It's been raining nonstop for 2 days on the other side of the state.
I saw Danae, then I think she dropped off again. So, oh, there she is.
Oh, she's
Moved
here.
on my screen.
Long time no see. I love your new hairdo, Danae.
Thanks. It's good to see you.
I'm jealous. Okay,
I'm jealous too. Yours is low maintenance.
Okay, I'm just gonna answer. I'm getting a series of texts from neighbors who want to sign in. And I'm just gonna tell them to try again. They tried to sign in a little earlier and we were still in the other meeting. So we're back on target again, but we do need to get started, I think. So first of all, welcome everybody. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Do we have Charmaine?
Not yet.
No. Sorry, I thought we had Charmaine. Can we call a meeting to order without Charmaine?
We can try.
Sure.
Okay, so
I'll
I have
second.
our secretary is here, Peter. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Does somebody need to second that?
I'll second.
Thank you. So this meeting comes to order and officially begins at 7:36. For those of you who don't know Charmaine, she miraculously serves on both this board and the previous board, and she's kind of our almost unofficial parliamentarian. I'd like to real quickly ask if everybody or anybody had any comments or issues concerning the minutes that we posted from the last meeting. Any issues with the meetings, with the minutes?
Nope.
Okay, I move that we approve the minutes. Peter, second it.
I'll second that.
Second.
Thank you. And onward we go. We are volunteers and we have about 75 people in this meeting. That means I will not be able to see raised hands. So I'm hoping that my board or folks can help me to monitor raised hands when we get to questions and answers.
I'll help you with that, Phil.
Thanks. Oh, thanks, Buzz. Yeah, that's something I'm kind of new at this. I don't exactly know how to do that. So I want to start the meeting. We sent out an agenda. It is an outline. The meeting has changed a little bit since then. So I'm going to start the meeting by kind of telling you what's going on. We've got two parts to the meeting. The up and under deck is up for the permit has expired, and I imagine that they are going to be applying for an extension to that permit. So there's some community feedback on that issue. And I want to remind people that the PRNC acts as a liaison between the community and the city staff and the city council. We are not a popularity contest. We are the messengers, so please don't shoot us. And I'm going to use that term again when we start talking to Danae, because I'm thrilled to have her here. And that we need to keep civil and we need to keep quick. I would like to acknowledge that the Up and Under Club has been an important member of our business community for 12 years. They took a dilapidated bar that I think I could safely use that term, that was frequented by 6 people with smelly carpet, and they turned it into what is probably one of the most successful, if not the most successful restaurant in the city of Richmond. They bring folks from the outside because of the unique concept. So we do see new people coming into our community, and no doubt they pay a lot in taxes. They have employed a staff of folks that, as far as I can see anecdotally, most of their staff seems to have been here for years. So things are going, that business is apparently quite successful. I know there's a second version of it in El Sobrante, so one can assume that this is a successful business and an important part of our community. I think that the concern that we have is, or that I'm hearing from the community, is that people have a lot of safety concerns. They have a lot of concerns for use of public land, and a lot of concerns about whether or not the community has access to the sidewalks. And people are very concerned often that some aspects of any pub, no matter how well run, can become a public nuisance. So we want to make sure that we can support our successful business, work or to support, to liaise between the community and the city, and see if together we can find creative solutions to respect both the people who live in the neighborhood, and I will, you know, for those of you who don't know, I live on that block, and also encourage the successful business. But I do want to remind you, this is not a popularity contest. Some people eat there, some people don't. Some people like the deck. They like to eat on the deck, some people don't. We're just talking about policy here. That's what our point is. To that end, the city was, we've had some communication with the city. The PRNC is not police and the board are not the police. But when issues like this come out, we do reach extensively out to the city. And this kind of follows, will follow in the upcoming meeting about Brickyard Cove at 8:30. We do reach out to the city and we try to find out what the policy is, whether the policy was followed. And in this case, between COVID and a series of staff that were no longer there, we are going to address with Danae and Eva what they know about what happened. I will say that this was in Danae's hands. Parklets are her domain. She was very 100% professional and 100% knowledgeable about what should happen in the world of parklets. And as this project unfolded, this project was taken out of her hands by the previous city manager. So generally, responses, I'm sorry, not city manager, previous public works director. What we generally hear is nobody knows what happened. I do want to make a statement that that person is currently employed by the city as a contractor. So if the city wanted to really tell us what happened, all they needed to do was walk, the city manager just needs to walk across the hall and find out. So we don't really know what the situation is in terms of what happened previously. And consequently, we are going to focus on moving forward. This is not going to be a hearsay about the city said this and they said that and Nate said that. It's not fair because those people who were there aren't here to speak. Eva is here because there have been some, because this this structure is out of
What happened to your hair?
out of
It's
permit,
gone.
and
Huh?
Eva
Your hair
is
is
code
gone.
enforcement manager.
Oh, sure.
Dealing with permit issues or issues concerning obstructions of sidewalks, that is in your domain, correct, Eva? And so we're addressing with Danae moving forward to find out what, if anything, can be done properly, and with Eva to see if there are any violations and how the code enforcement department is going to handle that. So once again, we simply don't have time to tell stories about about our likes and dislikes above and beyond the fact that Eva and Danae are here to answer those questions. If we have time before 8:30, and we may not, given the number of people we have, and Danae or Eva are willing, we might shoot them a few yes or no questions concerning other topics. I will remind those of you who have not seen the agenda, this is not a regular meeting. This meeting was held specifically to address the land use meeting that preceded it at 8:30. And when this time-sensitive issue came up, we included this in. That's why we don't have community briefs, and we're not going to talk about to the various community organizations. We usually have those. So this is really about these two topics. We need to keep moving. I do want to remind people that the Point Richmond Neighborhood Council has been available and meeting every single month through COVID. So there was never a time when the community was not available to answer questions. So I think that what we should do, and I'm going to ask Lisa if she'll chime in periodically, because she is much more procedural than I am and much less chatty. So I think maybe we could, if we could ask Danae to open and say a few words about what she knows about the history prior to when, and you can say no if you can't answer, prior to when it was taken out of her hands, and then if she would comment about how we can move forward with it.
Yeah, I'm keeping it very simple because I'm literally the last person standing from that whole period. But ultimately, as the city parking authority, I worked hand in hand with the legal department to draft and create a parklet program with the intent of ensuring that it's going to be safe. It was to be temporary, and it should be enjoyed by the community in general. Even if one person is sponsoring it, it should be enjoyed by all. The intent was not to extend a business or a structure in the right of way permanently. Encroachment permits and parklet permits are provisional. Parklet permits are not to be issued for any period longer than 3 years. So someone could apply for a permit that is a pop-up for like parking day, something very temporary you can put out there couple of days. You could put a parklet out there for a special event, you know, for a week, a couple of weeks, a couple of months, or you can ask for an annual parklet that could be renewed every year, up to 3 years. But the whole process of having a parklet program was so that it would be permitted, it would be safely built, and it would receive annual inspections that are part of the parklet program. So if a parklet permit is issued, not only do they have to pay the first year, but they have to pay every year after and receive an inspection. And that is all handled in the transportation department. Now, I want to be very clear that parklets permits can't be issued without an encroachment permit. But an encroachment permit can be issued without a parklet permit. Similar to a parklet permit, encroachment permits are also provisional. And so that means they're temporary in nature. They're not to be extended. They're not to be to extend the value or the square footage of an adjacent property because it's in the right of way. And by its nature, if there's a change in city policy, a change in development, such as bike lanes and other traffic issues, a parklet or emergency issues, a parklet should be able to be removed within 24 hours, not a permanent structure that was built at up and under. So in 2020, Mr. Chivers came to the city, and the first step, if anyone who's applying for a parklet, if they're able to meet the items on the checklist, the end result is that they're going to receive both an encroachment permit and a parklet permit and a parklet number. And Mr. Trivers was the first one to actually submit a full plan for a parklet. The first step is usually to give me a call so I can talk someone through to see what their idea for a parklet is and whether or not they have a chance of, you know, being approved. And Mr. Trivers did that. Then he submitted some plans, and it was going according to the guidelines until it didn't. The structure that he ended up building after he was issued a permit to begin construction is not the structure that was initially discussed or the plans provided. Granted, there were some changes because there was something going on with the drainage, and that was held primarily with discussions and planning with the civil engineer at the time, Mr. Rogers. And at times, Yoder Bermudez, who was the former public works director, also chimed in on that. But ultimately, there was a couple of things that were happening in 2020. There were two programs, and I don't want to get them mixed up, because one was the outdoor seating program that was open to anyone who had a business or a restaurant in Point Richmond or anywhere in the city, by the way, as long as they had the adequate outdoor sidewalk space, they could conduct their business outside. It was like an emergency temporary permit, and that was handled by the city manager's office. And then there's the parklet program, which is beyond the sidewalk, from the curb on, and that's part of parking management, transportation demand management, and that's where I came in. And so Mr. Trivers already had some outdoor seating that was already part of his outside building adjacent activities outside of the building envelope. But then he came to the city and he asked for a parklet. And so initially we were trying to get it on Richmond Avenue. However, the utility company, which is on the checklist, you have to check with utilities and make sure that they're okay with it. In this case was PG&E, was not happy with that location because it was by a utility pole. And
Pardon me, Danae.
yes.
Pardon me, Danae, I just want to correct that the original was on Railroad Avenue.
I'm sorry. Yeah, Railroad Avenue.
And if, because this is so important, if the structure were less permanent, because I have seen many parklets in front of power poles, but they are something that emergency vehicles or PG&E can get to. So if it's a temporary situation, do you have any knowledge of that, whether or not the nature of the structure was part of the restriction?
Well, in this case, because I was part of the communications with PG&E, they did not want any structure, permanent or temporary, at that particular location. And because it's a public easement for utilities, we abided by their concerns for safety, because they said it would be hard for their bucket trucks to get in and out and to service and move around. Additionally, and I'm just going by memory, I think there was something having to do with East Bay mud. I think there was a drain or something over there as well. And this is just vaguely from memories in all the communications back and forth. So I suggested actually considering putting the parklet on Richmond Avenue instead. But the parklet that we had discussed was not the width that it ended up being or the length it ended up being. So I don't want to recap too much, but there was quite a bit that went on. And one of the engineers who's no longer with the city issued a notice to Mr. Trivers to abate the structure. And ultimately, Yoder Bermudez, the former public works director, overrode that decision. He requested that I refund the parklet permit fees, which essentially removed transportation out of the whole discussion. And he said that he would handle and process the structure under encroachment permit. And if you look at the copy of the encroachment permit, he wrote it was like COVID related circumstances. So he was issued that permit. And then I didn't know that it had been extended an additional year because it was no longer under the purview of the transportation department. So where we are today, I was brought into this discussion again, I think maybe 2-3 weeks ago, when I received a complaint of some concerns about traffic and other safety issues. And I responded and I CC'd the appropriate departments, engineering, the police department, and code enforcement. And then I didn't hear anything. So then a couple of weeks later, I heard, oh, well, now Danae has to handle the parklet because Danae issued a parklet permit. And now, Mr. Trivers has been asked to submit another parklet permit. So I had to get up to speed, and I found out that the encroachment permit that former Public Works Director Bermudez issued had expired in December 31st, 2021. without renewal. So that was already a violation, and I knew that code enforcement was on top of that. But then I heard that Mr. Trivers would like to submit another application for the parklet. And I was okay with that. I gave him the updated guidance, and I said, you just submit a complete packet and we will review it. I have yet to receive a complete packet. Instead, the narrative has been, well, I already submitted one 2 years ago. Why can't I just resubmit, reapply? And then the conversation changed to, well, I was issued a parklet. And then the last conversation is, I was issued an encroachment permit, but I didn't know I had an encroachment permit. So where we are today as a city official and as a city parking authority who oversees the parklets is, if there is a complete packet submitted to me, I will review it. If that structure can meet the guidelines, I will review it. If the structure does not meet the guidelines, I will advise how he can meet it. And then we will, if he can comply, then we will issue a parklet permit. But that's where we are moving forward. Eva can attest to you that anytime a building permit, an encroachment permit, anything is expired, especially over 180 days, which is 6 months, you have to start anew. We give you quite a bit of grace period, and that's through the uniform building codes, zoning codes, electric codes, all those uniform codes that we are responsible for. You have 180 days usually to work with us, but we never heard anything within that 180 days. So you have to start new. And then my understanding from the complaints are that the demand for that corner has changed. So as a city, we have to collectively look at, has the demand changed because of the bike lanes? And does the community still support the parklet? Because again, the intent of a parklet is to be temporary. And in Point Richmond, where parking is prime and very limited at best, the city would like to give the opportunity to other businesses to also have a parklet. And as we well know, if there was one parklet on the street, in fact, we had to discuss, I can't remember, it was a Brazilian restaurant. They also wanted to have a parklet also on Richmond Avenue. And I said we couldn't do it because that would impact the flow of traffic. But I suggested that perhaps if the community supported it, they could put a parklet on the side street. Can you guys help me? What's the name of the side street on the corner?
Tunnel.
Yes. And I never heard back from her. And
She
so,
went
and
out,
that's just
she went out of business.
okay, so that's just one example. I've had several businesses come to me and say, well, we want to put a parklet here. And we say yes or no, it'll work. And then Mr. Trivers is the only one who followed through and actually submitted plans. So that wraps it up for me. If you have any questions, I can answer them.
I'd like to answer ask a question, then Lisa's going to make some comments. And those of you who know Lisa know that she's pretty methodical. So a big concern, and Nate has gone on the road radio mentioning it, is that is a particularly dangerous corner for turns and always has been. It's an AC transit route, and it is an emergency situation for the fire trucks if there's a train track. The red zone seems to be a gigantic concern because we no longer have the red zone or visibility in the red zone. And could you quickly comment on how the red zone affects things?
Generally speaking, from curb to curb, from the curb back, it should be 25 feet free. It should be red curb, generally speaking. But in this case, there may have been some exceptions provided by the Public Works Director at the time. And that's the issue. We really can't speak to the past because if he okayed it, then that's where it was at that time. But generally speaking, it's 25 feet from the intersection of the corner back on each in each direction. That's usually a red curb. And that's in the vehicle code. I can't remember the vehicle code right now because I wasn't expecting this.
Right.
Yes,
No,
question.
it's okay. I just, most
Right.
people, I think most people just know what red zones are. We're not, usually you put nothing in them. Lisa, do you want to ask a couple questions? And then I see Edie has her hand up.
And the red zone, just to say, for clarification, it's not only for the triangle of visibility, because that triangle of visibility is usually supposed to be free, but it's also for fire lanes.
Correct.
So
Before I wanted to ask Danae some questions, just for me to kind of go through this a little bit methodically, I wanted to give Eva a chance to kind of give a current status from a code enforcement perspective about what is the current status, and was there an annual renewal process for the encroachment permit? What are the notices of violations, and have they been addressed, or what is needed to address them first from a code enforcement perspective? And then I think it makes sense to kind of jump back in as far as helping understand next steps from a parklet perspective.
So Eva, let me just answer the first question where she asked about the encroachment permit renewal.
Sure.
I touched base today with engineering, and we discussed how encroachments are provisional, and we went over the records, and the permit tech was explaining to me that usually encroachment permits aren't issued for a year at a time. They're usually like 6 months, 9 months. But they said this was an exception, and that it was renewed for an additional year. And so I just found that interesting. So it just depends on, and in this case, who approves the time frame for the encroachment permit. But it's usually not a year at a time like this, unless there's a special agreement, an MOU, something like that. But other than that, encroachment permits are very temporary.
And when you say it was renewed for an additional year, when did that happen?
I can provide you, I don't know the exact dates, because I know you're going to ask me this because it's engineering and they were supposed to attend this evening. But from what I recall, the first permit was issued in 2020, and then it was extended to the end of 2021. So it was issued at the beginning of 2020, I believe, and then extended until December 31st, 2021. And why I remember that is because there was a certain notation by Director Bermudez, is that it was in consideration of COVID. So the city was being considerate of, the circumstances at the time.
And do they normally, I don't know if this is a question for you or for Eva, do those extensions normally have to undergo a public review as well, or is that just between the city and the permittee, the person submitting the permit?
Well, in this case, it's not a big encroachment permit. It's not like, I'm trying to think of an example, Eva, maybe you can think of something, but the only other type of encroachment permit that I would think that might extend longer than that is something like with East Bay Mud, in which there's a big project that might take a year or two, but this isn't that. So no, it's not a public process to review it unless there's some type of public concern not to review it. Other than that, it's handled in-house administratively.
Okay, so Eva, can you then maybe speak then about current status, any pending notices of violations, what you can tell the public and what you can't?
Sure. Currently, the only outstanding violation that exists at the property is the actual, we're waiting to hear back with regards to the encroachment permit. So we have not moved forward. We issued a notice of violation, just for a little background, back in July, on July 29th, 2022. And the property owner was cited for 4 violations, I believe. Yes. One was the placement of construction cones in the street. Those have been removed. He was also cited for obstruction of the sidewalk. That item has been removed. The encroachment permit for the parklet He has applied for the encroachment permit, so we're waiting for the outcome of that. And there was also included the use of the barbecue grill that was on the property, but we've actually on the public's right of way, and we've actually resolved that issue. So
Eva, how did that resolve, please?
the grill, if it's in use, according to planning, it should be utilized in the rear of the lot. So on the back side of the building, they can store it on the side of the building, which is where the code enforcement officer has observed it. She's not seen it in use in front or on the sidewalk since the notice was issued.
I received a video from a neighbor today of that barbecue or that smoker functioning in the corner at the crosswalk. Now with some kind of stanchions around it. My understanding is that when those things are in use, no one should be able to touch it. So the stanchions were there and they took up, and I can send a video to anyone who wants to see it.
Sure.
It appears as though the stanchions were taking up more of the sidewalk, but we're not disallowing a child or anybody to, to burn themselves, I guess, or presumably to open it and tamper with the food.
Okay. I would love to see that video if you have it. And then of course, we'll certainly follow up on it. But it's been my understanding in my recent conversation today with the code enforcement officer, she has not observed the barbecue grill in use since the notice has been issued.
I'm getting lots of photos. A couple weeks ago on a Friday, it was in use without the stanchions in the same place it always has been. But again, I'm not the cops. I will forward the emails to you.
Okay. Thank you. We will certainly follow up on that.
Okay, and so then I think even just to help finish up your statements, and then it can open up to the public. What is required in order for them to get the encroachment permit that I guess you do the encroachment permit, but that's engineering, public works.
Engineering, we're simply the enforcement arm.
Okay,
So
great.
once the notice has been issued and the property owner or the occupant, business operator has engaged or made an effort to move forward with bringing the property into compliance. In this particular situation, it would entail obtaining that encroachment permit in terms of the time frame that they would need to undergo. That's a decision that has to be made by engineering. We would not, because we're not familiar with that process. So we would only move forward with enforcement once we've been notified by engineering staff that they have exhausted all of the remedies or measures, or either the business operator or property owner has refused to engage any more in that process, and then we would move forward with enforcement. But we've not received that direction from engineering.
And so Danae, as part of the parklet permit process, that requires an encroachment permit with it. So an extension or renewal of any encroachment permit would require the parklet permit to actually go through, correct?
Yes, so I had a discussion with engineering today, and for all transparency, here was the discussion. Engineering has the encroachment permit renewal request, and they are considering approving it on a temporary basis, conditional to Mr. Trivers applying for a parklet permit. So it gives him time to apply for a parklet permit. And if it's determined that he cannot comply with the terms of the parklet program, or if he chooses not to, then the encroachment permit will be null and void.
Is there a time frame on if they extend it? Is there a time frame limit by which there has to be a submission of a parklet permit?
So it would be very temporary, 3 months maximum, so end of the year. And that would give everyone time to review. Now that said, if Mr. Trivers were to like submit a parklet permit and we have a discussion that, hey, maybe there's some modifications that are required, how long do you need to work on the modifications to comply with the parklet guidelines, then the city will be willing to work with him. But at stake is all the other concerns, like to make sure that the triangle of visibility, safety, traffic congestion, all that's addressed. So I know it's kind of confusing, but transportation and engineering, we coordinate on that. We discuss it, we go out, we do site visits. In this case, we're going to have to go back out and do measurements, but it is conceivable that Mr. Trivers could comply if he can meet all the requirements of the checklist and the guidelines.
Okay.
Edie?
You mostly answered my questions. I do have a question about the sidewalk program. You had mentioned that the original approval was based on, in part, the sidewalk program. Is that program still active? And I have another question, and you may or may not know this, but as part of the evaluation by you or by engineering, whomever, is the fire department part of that inquiry?
Okay, so as far as the encroachment permit goes, it's usually handled by the engineering inspectors or engineering inspectors. Fire doesn't usually get involved until, I'm trying to think of some examples. Until if they were to tell us that maybe they can't get their apparatus through the street, if they can maneuver their apparatus, that would be a concern. If the actual barbecue pit was on the parklet, that would be a concern. If there was, fires or torches on the parklet, because, during this time frame, let me just kind of backtrack a little bit. So I'm the chair for the parking and traffic advisory work group, and that's comprised of several different department representatives, depending on what the issue is that we're talking about. In this case, fire department chimed in, planning chimed in, building chimed in, engineering, and then we had economic development, because during that time it was, COVID. So they had an opportunity to chime in early on, and we proceeded with their comments at that time. So if fire had a concern, they would step in, and they have their own inspectors. They would also notice them, and we would know it because we're all in the same system. To answer your question about the sidewalk program, that was initially an emergency program for COVID during the shelter in place. I don't know if it has sunset, so I would have to look into that. My understanding is still involved, because I haven't heard that it's ended. So I'll look into that. And as far as an evaluation process goes, if Mr. Trivers was actually issued a parklet permit, there would have been an annual inspection by transportation. One way or the other, they would have received a review. Good review, bad review, make some corrections. However, the parklet process was never completed. So as an encroachment permit, there aren't really any annual or periodic inspections. What usually happens is if an encroachment permit or any other permit in the city is issued and we receive a complaint or staff observes a violation, then the person who's responsible receives a notice. And in this case, that's exactly what happened. Code enforcement issued a notice.
Can I jump on, Edie, can I jump on your question real quick before we go back to you? Was there either a traffic study and was RPD, the police department, did they sign off?
RPD didn't make any comments at that time. I will have to, that I recall. So I could go back to my meeting notes.
Would that assume approval if they didn't make any comments?
Yeah, just like we have a lot of group things that come through the city, special event permits, and if I don't comment, then I don't have an issue. However, a traffic study, I don't think we did a traffic study specifically for this application, but at that time we had information available. And like I said, it was a collective. We reviewed it as a team. No one really had objections. The main issue was the public utility pole and communicating with PG&E. And then also there were some issues with, after Mr. Trivers started the construction, he was concerned about the drainage issues. And that was in the wheelhouse of engineering to focus on. That wasn't my purview.
We're gonna, we may run a few minutes off schedule. At this time, Nate is scheduled to speak. But because we started a few minutes late and with the patience of our city staff, I just want to make sure that, you know, I'm seeing things in the comments and people are texting me. A lot of the questions I'm asking are coming in by text, because not everyone's comfortable speaking publicly. It is the community's meeting. I'm just running it. Is there anyone else who would like to make comment about this? And then we're going to hear from Nate, and there's not a lot of time. You know, he's got 5 minutes, and then people can ask questions of Nate. Before we take a look at whether or not the community would like to vote on whether we will ask actually, I'm going to ask Charmaine probably if she'll speak to that, because she's got the parliamentarian part down. So there's so many people, so we really want to, you know, that we've never had this many people at a meeting. So obviously there are people. I see somebody on the telephone with their hand raised, iPhone.
Is that me?
Yes,
be
I guess,
me.
yes.
Okay, because I forget you always have to rename yourself. This is Jessie West. I just want to thank everybody for the fantastic summaries. I'm sorry, is it Danae that just gave that wonderful historical summary and the great questions? What caught my attention just now is she said there were no objections. I don't think we had a clue how huge that thing was going to be until it was. You know, it was not there and it was being worked on, and then all of a sudden it was there and it was huge. So we couldn't raise objections beforehand because we didn't know what was going to happen. My concern is that it's scary, it's dangerous, it's an impediment to traffic. I love that people gather on it and enjoy hanging out on it. I've done that myself, but I just think in its current configuration, it's dangerous. And my understanding is it violates code. That's it.
Thanks, Jesse. Anybody else before we go to Nate?
Can I say something, Philip?
Yes, please, Charmaine.
Oh, this is Leslie. I
Oh, I'm
just want to
sorry.
say
I'm
that,
sorry, Leslie. I was on a different page. Go ahead, Leslie.
okay. Just yesterday, I had to drive by the Up and Under to get to the freeway. I went on Richmond Avenue, and there was a delivery truck parked next to the parklet. So you add the parklet and then you add the delivery truck. I had to go into the adjacent street in order to get around it. And if a fire truck was trying to get out, there was no way he could. And there was no one in the delivery truck. I'm just saying it took up like 2 lanes almost.
Thank you, Leslie. Right.
Thanks, Leslie.
Janet?
Yeah, I'm sort of new doing this. I'm concerned about several issues. I think that the area there is one of the main entrances into Point Richmond, and that this parklet has created congestion that the other person who just spoke talks about the traffic issues, the navigating that corner. It's just visually, it's a blockage when I'm going into Point Richmond. I've found that I do not drive through Point Richmond much anymore. And some of it is because of this situation and another one on another location. I'm concerned about the congestion. I'm concerned about encroachment into public space. I think it's so easy to get into doing that, but it interferes with both the sidewalk and the street. And it's not just the physical structure, it's the congestion that is attracted around that corner. I don't go there anymore. I used to go to one of the little Mexican restaurants. I don't go there anymore. It's just too much congestion, too much to navigate. I'm also concerned about ADA issues. Parklets draw people. I'm wondering if the city has really thoroughly taken a look at issues related to sidewalk encroachment, safety, getting across the street. I think if they haven't, they better. So, and I could probably say more, but I think I'll write a letter to who's Evans also. Those are my main things.
Thank you, Janet.
And we are gonna, and everybody should be heard. We want everyone to be heard, but we do have another important issue coming up and presentation. AJ. AJ?
Yep, just quickly, I'm just wondering if there have actually been any untoward accidents or other problems directly resulting from the parklet's presence. Is there any record of anything untoward happening because of the presence of the parklet?
I don't know, but I can find out and report back to the committee members to relay the information to you.
Great. Thank you, Danae.
Thanks, AJ. What I'd like to do, because this is Nate's business and he's an important part of our community, is to go ahead and let him, he's got some time to make some comments, and then there's time for some questions to Nate.
Is it my turn?
Yeah, go ahead, Nate.
Hi,
Welcome. Are
thanks.
you here or are
Hi.
you in Washington?
I'm in neither. I'm in Oregon.
Oregon, I'm sorry, misspoke.
All right, thanks, guys. I think the main part of this topic that we seem to be missing is the process. Okay, and thank you, Phil, and the neighborhood council for bringing this attention, because you were not part of the process. And I'm a little concerned why you were not part of the process, because any normal kind of human being, business person or whatever, does not know when they need to go to the neighborhood council or not. I've been to the neighborhood council many times on many other subjects, and I was always directed by the city of Richmond saying, Nathan, you need to do X, Y, and Z. So thank you for keeping the integrity of the council, because as an advisory group and you're not being involved, you can't do your job. And unfortunately, you were never given the chance to do your job 2 years ago. And so we're here now. So with that being said, the process is everything in this. I went to the city of Richmond in 2020. I guess looking at them as a lifeline. We were shut down like every other business in our nature. We were shut down. Governed to me, we were told what we can do and what we can't do. So I talked to Danae about this in 2018 and thought, God, that'd be cool to have a park, because I saw that other cities were doing it. And I thought, oh, that'd be cool for the city of Richmond or on this corner in the neighborhood. And we started, to scratch the surface a little bit. And I ended up pulling back from that, because the thing that was left saying, hey, Nathan, you need to build it, you need to pay for it, you need to insure it. But you cannot only have your business. You need to do this, and it needs to be a public space for everybody. I thought, well, geez, I'm going to spend thousands of dollars. I'm going to build something for people to sit and hang out on, but I cannot use my business for it. I love Richmond as much as everybody else, but as a businessman, that's not a smart move. And so we walked away from it. 2 years later, COVID hit. Boom. I went back to Danae and she said, yeah, this is great. Let's work on it. Now, listen, the process, there was no process. As the members have on the timeline that I said, and I could send to anybody so you could see, this was a 7-month process that I worked with the city of Richmond. And they asked me, and I did everything that was asked of me. Nathan, do this, Nathan, do that. Hey, yes, PG&E shut down the project because on that side. I said, well, let's move it over to here. Danae agreed. We went forward over it. Boom. We had many engineers out there, and I brought out, because every winter is anybody who lives down there, and maybe Jessie West, you know, since she's down on the corner, you'll know I am at the lowest point of Point Richmond. Every leaf from every house comes to me. We flood every year. I go out in front. I call Viola. I wave the cars down because the cars hit the water. It tornadoes. I said, listen, guys, this parklet that we want to do cannot be here on this corner at this level. It is at a grade like this. Okay. We all don't need to be engineers. We all don't need to have a college education to realize if you want something flat on a level like that, it needs to be built like that. I mean, it's really straightforward. I wasn't trying to pull a fast one. I'm not trying to do anything. Remember, I have a very successful business that was shut down to zero, from 35 employees to 0. Okay. The city of Richmond said, hey, let's do this. You're the only person who's asked. You're the only person that has the gumption to go through this process. So I go through the process. We build it. We do it. Danae gives us a permit. And we go for it. And unbeknownst to me, and also unbeknownst to Danae, as she said, she didn't know that I was issued an encroachment permit. And she didn't know that it had some special caveats to it. It's there for a year. You think I should know? Yeah. I just found out about this 2 weeks ago in an email saying, hey, by the way, your encroachment permit, which I've gotten many of them. I got them for the patio that exists on Railroad Avenue. We got an encroachment permit for a memorial for Mr. Lampa. So I understand the process, but I was never emailed and I was never mailed. I was mailed my reimbursement check that I still haven't ever cashed because I just thought, oh, this is weird. So I left it up on my board, and that was mailed October 23rd. Well, maybe my date's not wrong. It was issued 11/5. It was sent out 11/23 for reimbursement. And I just thought, oh, that's nice. It was reimbursement because of COVID. It's all about communication of process, and everything in my process, it was stated, this is the first time for us doing it. We're copying and pasting a program from Oakland because we don't know how to do this. And oh, geez, we're excited for you to do it. So we're going to work with this. So they, as you see, they said, do this, I did that. They said, do this, I did that. I said, engineers, I can't build something. I'm not going to build something. I'm not putting my customers at a 45-degree angle in the street to sit and eat on the street. It was all plain and simple. I asked that I would like to build a permanent structure. And that's what we did. And that's what's guided. And then it was said, no, that's not wrong. And then Yoder pushed it through. So I am a product of a undefined process. Okay. You guys got denied of the process. And now I'm being affected by a process that I went through. And now 2 years later, we're in this situation. So I'm not going to spend much time on this because everybody spoke a lot, and I could say he say, she say. Everything that I have is on paper and is very transparent, and all my communication from me to the city of Richmond was very clear. And if I could take back time, I wish I could, because the part of the process that was the biggest thing skipped was you guys, allowing you guys in the neighborhood to have a comment. Okay. And I can answer to the safety of it. Yeah, it's built up off the ground, because of flooding, plain and simple. That's the only reason. Only reason, because if we did not build it that way, every business and everything on that corner leading up would be flooded, and you would have been flooded. And you want to talk about the city getting in trouble? Holy moly, to allow me to build a parklet that floods out the neighborhood, that's no good. Regarding flow, listen, I told them in an email too, and I said it for years, that corner is a nightmare. There's a stop sign on Railroad Avenue that you can't even see because it's 5 feet back from the corner of that building. So you guys know whether it's a parklet, whether it's a truck, it doesn't matter whether what is in that space. We took a parking space. It's no different than a truck sitting there. And if you're saying we need parking, well, why don't you address the 10 parking spots down Railroad Avenue where we have all of our friendly homeless people living and doing who knows what down there? So that you know, the issue of me taking away parking for the neighborhood, it's a little questionable. Me saying it made it more dangerous for that corner's dangerous. They need to put a stop sign. There should be a stop sign on West Richmond heading towards Mechanics Bank from the markets, because people fly down there like a bunch of jerks. And I've had more accidents. So to answer the question, there's been no accidents due to the parklet, but there is accidents or almost accident on a weekly basis on that corner. Whether people are driving like jerks and don't see people in the crosswalk, whether people are making a left on a West Richmond and the guy's flying down and they almost collide, it's a nightmare, plain and simple. I have no intention to do something over and above the community and beyond. I've prided myself to be a community-based business. Okay. We'd like to take care of the neighborhood. We like to do what's right. Now, there's a lot of layers here. There's a lot of personal. There's a lot of people chiming in that personally, like Philip said, they don't like the pub or don't like me. And he knows that. And the other people do, and that's fine. We can't make everybody happy, but I haven't done anything wrong. I've only done what I've been told to do. And now I'm being held accountable to an encroachment permit that is naturally expires in 90 days. They give you the permits, you could do your work and you're done. I've specially got one for a year. Why did I get it for a year? I have no idea. Why wasn't I not mailed an encroachment permit? Why was I not emailed an encroachment permit? I have 60 plus emails over 7 months from the city. And you're telling me that I didn't do something. That is not right. Okay. And that is the fault of the city and their process. And the city, Danae or anybody will never admit their fault, because that's not what the city does. They will shuck and jive and hold you accountable to something that's whether true or not. And this is extremely unfair. Okay. This thing saved the business. I have family and people that now have a job because of this. And I think, you know, the process, the going to parklet process, she has all the information. The checklist is the same thing I went through and sent in. The only thing different is the height of that parklet.
Okay, and I would like to remind everybody that we started by saying we can't go backwards. I
Well,
see
we
a question.
are. I mean, this is kind of going back.
Well, we're talking, sure, and the history of this is cloudy. So what we're trying to do is figure out how we can accommodate, if we can accommodate and move forward, I think. Gary? Gary, do you have your hand up, Gary?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Gary.
Let me go back a little bit of history. You know, when Mary and I first moved here, we were just really hoped somebody would come on in the area at the Up and Under and really open up something that was going to help Point Richmond. And Nathan, I want to congratulate you. You've really made something happen there, and we helped you with some of that, and we're delighted with that. And so I think you got to work. Let's forget the process for a second. And one of the things we've been successful, the things we've worked on here is building partnerships and figure out how do you get stuff done. And it's not about what the city did or what Nate did or what the neighborhood council did. I'm concerned about the fact that Up and Under really has made a difference in downtown. I do think, however, we have a problem. We have a problem with parking, okay, but also probably more that's a bad intersection. And so I'm looking for something more that would say, you know, this is a vibrant business for us that we really support, and I think a lot of people do. But how do we actually work together now to solve some of the issues around the parking and the safety, et cetera, rather than just saying, well, who did this and who did that? That has some value, but we got to get past that and say, this is a vibrant business that if you all recall when we first came here, there was nothing there. And so how do we do it right? I think the parklet where it is really a problem. It really is a traffic problem. I don't know how you solve that. I don't have the answer, but I'm a little bit worried about that, you know, that we said kind of thing, rather than saying, you know, this is a vibrant business that we ought to make work. And to do that, we have to all work together. And Neighborhood Council can really help do that. Unfortunately, because of the process back in the beginning, we really didn't get involved in it very much, unfortunately. We have the opportunity with the renewal now saying, okay, what should it look like? And Nate, I don't know what we do around, certainly the parklet, I'll be candid. The way it sits there right now doesn't feel very good to me. Okay, I don't know the answer to that, but I'm looking for something more that, rather than just pushing at that in the past and saying, okay, where do we go that does make this work as a viable business in the point that really is a good advantage place for us? And so that's just my take of, let's not get lost in the detail too much of saying there's a partnership here about how do we make this work from Point Richmond overall. That's my take.
Thanks, Gary. Peter.
Right, I guess this question would be for both Nathan and Danae. Is there any reason that we've established that we like the parklet, it's a bad location. Could it be relocated across the street on Railroad over by, no? You're shaking your head, Nathan.
No, I mean, for one, the buses, and you talk about traffic issue, oh my God. I mean, that's a nightmare on that corner. You see all the whoever's that park on that corner and across the street, and now they've redlined it to stop all the riffraff and the unregistered cars. So across the street.
Well, you have your Lumpa.
I
smoking
don't have
garden
it.
there, right?
I don't have anything. I have just a little sweat equity of making a corner look a little nicer than a bunch of trash. Now that corner has been coined COVID corner at the beginning because people hung out there. The ABC was like, oh God, everybody's going out of business. So they passed a law saying they can have to-go alcohol, and people took drinks across the street and hung out there. Now, was that legal from getting drinks from me? Yes. Was that legal to sit in city area? Probably not, but that's not my problem. That's the police. But the parklet wanted to be on Railroad, right across the street at ground level, very simple, no issues, built to the specs I did. Now, we got to remember the proposal that I gave in 2020 is the exact proposal. The only difference is since it got moved there, Dane Rogers said, hey, Danae, can we extend the parklet 8 feet so we come into the sidewalk, because that sidewalk that we're so concerned about, especially with the smoker topic, which isn't for this agenda, but there is 7 feet from the building to where that tree is. There's a tree and a sitting area. There's 7 feet there. Okay, so that's 4 feet bigger than a handicap area. And so we were saying, hey, if we're building it here, we want to bring a couple feet in so it can be stepped up and built into it. It was approved. It was written down. Dane Rogers notes. Danae said, yeah, that's no problem. Let's go through it. So, I don't have much to argue against because I did everything I was told to do. Okay. I didn't secretly change my proposal. No, it's 40 feet by 6 feet. The only thing that changed was the 2 feet and the height per the engineer. And what do you want me to do about that? I'm doing what I'm told. And again, it goes back to the process. I know Gary said it's not about the process, but in the issue from the neighborhood council saying, hey, we want to know why we weren't in the process. Okay. That's what this meeting was set for. Hey, city. And I haven't even heard that answer. I haven't even heard the question. So why wasn't the neighborhood council brought into it? Why was a petition that I did and a letter from the PRBA, why was that sufficient enough? Why wasn't I told, hey, by the way, go to the neighborhood council? Because it's the city's job to advise me of what to do, and they didn't do it. I mean, this is a time of panic, guys. You got to remember that the world was
I understand what you're saying, but the people who made those decisions aren't here. We can't speak to them. So, we can't.
Guys, I have a
mitigate that.
solution. I have a solution going forward. I have a great solution.
All right,
Can I say what it is?
sure, Jesse.
Thank you. We all know that Nate is 100% right, that this has always been a terribly dangerous corner, and it's a terribly dangerous corner, whether there's a parklet or not, because there's no crosswalk. There's that stupid stop sign that nobody sees or understands on Railroad. It's an intersection basically of 3 roads, and it's very confusing, and people do these last 5, 6, 7 years have started speeding down West Richmond and up West Richmond. It's insane. Let's advocate, I don't know, a stronger word, insist that the city engineers get off their asses and make that intersection safe. A stop sign on West Richmond heading from the markets toward the plunge. Nate mentioned that. That's an awesome idea. We need
Jesse?
a crosswalk. Yes.
Jesse, your points are very well received. We need to push this meeting on because we do have another one to follow, and I need Charmaine to help me with procedure here. I
Okay, but
did
now we
see-
have the solution.
Well, a solution for what might happen with traffic control in the future is not.
Well, you said we should go
is not,
forward. You
is
said
not in
you-
this, is not in, but, and I agree with you, but it's not for this meeting. And we are actually scheduled to have this at the next meeting possibly. Danae, I saw you shaking your head a couple times, and I just want to know whether I perceived that that was what was happening. And if you wanted to make any comments.
Like I said, I really don't want to relive the past, but
Okay,
I don't know when any of you have experienced the city not directing anything in Point Richmond not to go through the PRNC.
particularly you, Danae.
And just to give you another example, I think it was Andrew Butt went to the PRNC at our urging. And he had really great plans. It looked pretty good, but he didn't have the community support. And so he did not pursue it. This is the same situation. If the community is supportive of Mr. Trivers' parklet application and he can comply with the actual guidelines this time and follow it through, I welcome him to do so, because I was excited for the parklet then and now. And I have communication, which I'm not going to share with everyone, that showed that all the city was trying to help and be supportive until the structure became a structure and not a parklet. So we're here, we're willing to work with Mr. Trivers. No one is trying to impact the community negatively, but safety is a concern. And when I spoke today to engineering, they are going to consider the outcome of this evening's meeting as far as what the status of the encroachment permit will be.
Thank you, Danae. I'm afraid to say I have to stop the questions. We are running really late, and I'd like to toss this over to Charmaine, if you will, on procedure. I apologize to those hands up that we couldn't hear from.
Right. What I would like to do, what I heard Danae say is that Nate should submit the packet for the parklet. Is that correct, Danae? Yes. So Nate, I wanted to know, do you plan on submitting a new packet for the parklet going forward?
No, I do not. She has everything I submitted is the same backlit from 2 years ago. It has the neighborhood response. I'm not, this
So
whole
then,
thing-
Danae, if he does not submit a new parklet packet, then where does the city stand?
in a lawsuit.
Then The encroachment permit, my understanding, will not be issued, and code enforcement will proceed with the administrative penalties.
Okay, so Danae, I want to ask you, what input do you want from the citizens of Point Richmond? Is there any input to give you at this point?
Thank you for that question, because usually what happens is staff is presented with a complete package. What made this unusual is that Mr. Trivers was the first. And yes, we were trying to circle around the process. And a point of clarification, it's not copied from Oakland. I drafted it, and I guarantee you, although staff was trying to get me to copy Oakland's project, we borrowed stuff from different cities, and I can show you my notes. But anyway, Parklets is not reinventing the wheels, so there are similarities to every program dealing with parklets. But if Mr. Trivers can comply, then we will be happy to issue him a permit. Today, it's not my judgment to make anything. I'm just giving you information and to make any suggestions. But all I ask for, all we are required by ordinance, by the way, it's in the ordinance. There was a master fee then and now for the parklets. So it was always required that there should be a complete packet. And in this instance, it wasn't complete because we were all trying to expedite this permit for Mr. Trivers because of COVID. We were trying to work with him. And so, yes, maybe there were some procedural issues, but the end result should have been a complete packet and the issuance of a parklet if the parklet was actually in compliance.
I find it,
And so back to Danae, then
like to
Danae,
respond to
do
that.
we need, do you need input from the Point Richmond residents at this point?
Yes, for anything in Point Richmond in general, because everyone is impacted directly with any changes to traffic flow or parking. We want input from the PRNC. We want input from the business association. We updated the ordinance and the section to require more input from the adjacent neighbors across the street and on either side as well, because we want to make sure that everyone is supportive. If everyone is supportive, if there's a consensus and Mr. Trivers can comply with the guidelines, then that parklet will remain there. It may need to be modified given all the things I'm hearing this evening, but there's a way to keep it
So
there.
Listen, I don't
So do
understand.
you need a vote?
Excuse me.
Do you need minutes from this meeting? Do you want a record of what we've discussed, or do you want a vote? What kind of input do you want?
Usually I would want some type of evidence that says the community supports the parklet or it does not. And that
Okay.
would have been part of the application.
Okay, so can I respond to this, please?
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Charlene? Okay.
Yeah.
I think it's all fabulous. The question is why we didn't do this 2 years ago? Why? Why can that question not be answered? Why was this not allocated 2 years ago?
We're
Okay,
here now,
as-
and that's all we can be. That's all we can do.
Oh, we're here now. Okay, well, then let's stop talking about the past then. Okay, if this is where we have a thing that's built, we all know, looking at the structure, it does not meet the guidelines. Okay, unless the city wants to tell me this or that, but there's a safety issue there. You guys want to talk about safety and traffic? Well, you put a parklet on the ground there, you're gonna have flooding, you're gonna have a lot of issues. So, you know, what I'm confused is you keep worrying about the process. Why didn't the neighborhood council get involved? Well, we haven't answered that question from 2 years ago.
Actually,
Why did they
actually,
not get involved?
actually, nobody, including this board, has asked why the neighborhood council was not involved.
You did on your things, and we want to know why this process got missed. So do I, because it's so important right now. I want to know why the process got missed.
As I said at the beginning,
No, this
purpose
is
of
on an
this
email that
meeting-
you sent out to everybody. You can read it on your thing. It was stating that this is an important thing about the process. Why was the neighborhood council not involved in this 2 years ago?
I'll
Can
have
that
to
question
review
be
that
answered?
email. I believe that my email said we would like to communicate with the city to make sure that we are not overlooked in the future. So we don't have time to go through that. I'm going to try to pick that up and to let the next part of the meeting proceed, because that's easy for me to pull off my iPhone. In the meanwhile, Charmaine,
Yes, I would like
would you like
to,
to suggest a vote?
well, I can make a motion to suggest a vote now, or we can have further discussion
How
from the community.
How you
So
cannot, sorry, go ahead.
I would like to know, does the community want to have further discussion at another meeting? Or does the community want us to make a motion to go forward with a vote now? We need to decide that.
It is extremely unfair to myself or anybody that would like to make a motion on this. I've spoke to you 4 minutes and been on this call for 49 minutes. And I know Philip wants to push through a vote, but if you want to get the community involved, there needs to be time, and you need to let every 64 participants talk, because the 5 people plus Jesse West and the other 2 people are not the community. Okay, they're not. And so if we're going to do this process, because we're not going backwards, then let's do it properly. Let's allocate the time, make 3 hours allocated. And I want every person in there to question me, question the city, question why, and go over all the details and give the city. You want to pull a traffic report? Pull a
Nate,
traffic report.
everybody who raised their hand spoke. The only people who could not spoke were people.
Well,
there were people who did not raise their hand.
Philip, it doesn't matter. There's not enough time.
I'm not here to argue with you.
You're not
Come on,
ramrodding
come
this
on.
through.
We
You're
need,
not
we
ramrodding
need
it
a
through.
parliamentarian here to make a point of order. This argument's not going to get us
There's no
anywhere.
arguing.
I agree that we need more discussion. I don't think that this should be rushed or determined by the fact that too much was scheduled for this meeting, when this obviously was going to be a big topic, okay? And I also don't want to vote up or down on something that's more nuanced. So let's make the time to do this right.
Okay,
I would like to
go,
make a
Charmaine.
motion that we continue this discussion at a further meeting with the Point Richmond Neighborhood Council in order to get the specifics about what's needed for the parklet and what Nathan has now, so that we can know what we're voting on.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor?
Okay, all in favor, raise your hand.
So this is all in favor of having an additional meeting to discuss this before we take a vote.
Can I have
Yes.
a question. Wait, hold on. I have a question for Danae as a really, this is a process question. So Public Works, you stated that they are planning to go forward with renewing the encroachment permit. So what is the timeline for these types of things, so we can figure out when we have to have a subsequent meeting, because they're connected?
So the discussion is that the city would like to work with Mr. Trivers to see if we can come to a solution. And part of that is if he were to submit a parklet permit, because it was never completed 2 years ago, and the encroachment permit that he received had expired, which starts the clock all over again. You have to reapply. That engineering would provide a short-term encroachment permit so that he can continue his business while he's applying for the parklet permit. And if at such time it is determined that he will not be able to comply, then he'll be directed how to address that. But if he can comply, then he will be issued a parklet permit.
And would that parklet permit be for another 3 years potentially, or does the 2 years go towards that 3 years maximum?
I would like to have community input on that one, and then talk with city staff.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so Phil, I think that we can say that we have to finish this issue now because 8:30 is the time for the next presenter to come.
Okay, so we are deciding that we will try to call a special meeting on the issue. Is that a good suggestion, Charmaine?
Well, it doesn't have to be a special meeting. Let's just say for now that we will have an additional meeting.
Okay,
We
we'll
don't
carry
know
this over.
when, yeah, PRNC will have to determine when we can do that.
Okay, so all in favor, do we have to take account on this, or can we just say we're gonna have the special meeting? It looks like people want it.
No,
Charmaine?
we made a motion. So after we make a motion, we have to vote and say, does everybody agree that we'll have an additional meeting, further
Okay.
discussion? Please raise your hand.
Okay, so all in favor of having an additional meeting, please raise your hand. And only paid members can vote. It looks overwhelming from where I sit. Only paid members can vote, please.
Paid members are those with a waiver.
Or those with a waiver.
Okay,
Thanks, Jim.
Can I make one quick comment before we close this?
Yes.
The Public Works Director directed me to work with Mr. Trivers on the parklet program, on the parklet permit, start to finish. And so that is what I'm willing to do. However, I don't think that staff needs to attend your next meeting, because if he's submitting a parklet application, the community discussion is what's had amongst yourselves, and then we get written documentation of that as a part of the parklet
Correct,
package.
Danae. Thank you. We were headed in that direction.
Okay.
And I want to thank both. Okay, so how do we wrap up this vote? It's visually pretty obvious. Peter?
Yeah, so it will be continued to a future meeting.
right. And now we need to go to the next presenter.
I just
Okay.
want to say thank you.
First,
Danae.
we need to thank Danae and Eva. It's been a late night and you are all stretched to the limit, and we're very grateful for your participation.
Yes. Thank you, Danae. Thank you, Eva. Thank you, Nate.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Nate. Okay, now we're going to go on to the site that is called the PG&E site. And I am going to pretty much hand this right back over to Charmaine. She sits on both the LUDRC and the LUDRC and the PRNC, so she's great at it. We do have the developer present. We apologize sincerely. We are running nearly 30 minutes late on this, and we have apologies. So can you pick this up, Charmaine, and
Yeah.
get the ball rolling?
So the Land Use Design Review Committee met at 6 o'clock today as planned. We did have a glitch in the access to the meeting, and some people had difficulty getting in. We had a presentation by the people who are developing the PG&E site, and many neighbors came to the meeting. During that time, we were able to ask some questions, but the LUDRC is not finished asking questions. We talked about the fill, we talked about the viewpoints from Brickyard Landing, from Sea Cliff. We talked about guest parking, accessibility, the retaining walls, the solar on the roof. We talked about several subjects, but I myself still have more questions to ask. And we found that we have a great deal of many neighbors who are very interested in this project. This is a big project, 94 units that are going to be there for a long time. We want to make sure that we get the input of the community. So, and we, even the LUDRC cannot vote on it because we have more questions. And some of the answers were vague, so we need more specific answers. And ultimately, the LUDRC passed a motion to continue this meeting. We want to expand the time period, have longer to discuss. And we will have a special meeting. It does not have to be tied in specifically to a PRNC meeting. We cannot approve this project for having so many members of the community who have not had a chance to ask questions. We really need to know what is it the community is interested in. So we will not have a vote tonight as we had previously announced. PRNC will not vote on this project tonight. We will vote on it in the future. And I can't give you an exact date until we can see when we're going to schedule the special meeting. We will have a presentation by the development company who's working on the PG&E site. And I think it's very appropriate, even though we're not voting, it's still very appropriate for Point Richmond Neighborhood Council members and neighbors to see the latest plans that they are proposing. So with that, I would like to turn this over to the developers so that you can share your screen and show your plans. Now, afterwards, we don't have a lot of time for questions, but Phil, I think that, how long is your presentation, Melissa? About 15 minutes?
Yeah, I was just going to ask, because I do want to be respectful of everyone's time. I could try to condense that a little bit, or if you want, I can just focus on specific parts of the presentation. I think a lot of us maybe know what areas we want to discuss and look at. So I'm happy to do what you think is best.
Yeah, I really like, there are many people here who have not seen the overview yet. So if you could run through the history and that kind of stuff kind of quickly, but then when you talk about the project, we need to see the different views that you have, the color, the placement of the units, and we need all of that explanation. So a quick overview of the plans. So I would say about 15 minutes, and then Phil, perhaps we have time for about 10 minutes of Q&A before we close the meeting.
Okay, and then I think I am not able to share my screen. So if someone can enable that.
Buzz, can you enable that?
And we were not able to share. We do have a SketchUp model that runs through the project as well, which I could share. That's kind of fun to look at. So maybe I'll have my architect, Cindy, can maybe get ready to share that as well.
Great.
Okay. Great. So good evening. My name is Melissa Durkin. I'm Senior Vice President of Development with Republic Urban Properties, the developer of the subject site. We are pleased to be here tonight presenting again to all of you. We've been working on this project for about a year now and have worked really closely with the Richmond Design Review Board and subcommittee members to really refine the project, incorporate feedback on the site plan and architecture and some of the concerns from the community, and we'll touch upon some of those changes tonight. We do appreciate all of the feedback and comments that we have received to date. Many of my design team members are here with me tonight to help answer any questions that you have. So Republic, we're a real estate development company out of San Jose. We do specialize in multifamily residential, but also have projects that include office, hotel, and retail. Our reach goes throughout the Bay Area, and we're excited for the opportunity to develop in Richmond. So the site was initially utilized by the Richmond Pressed Brick Works Facility in 1916, and then it was purchased by PG&E in 1949, where they had a 379-foot tall natural gas holder facility up until 1989. And then they did put the site up for sale in 2021. They did get multiple offers. There was an interview process that was conducted, and Republic was ultimately selected to purchase the property. The site does already have a general plan designation and zoning designation for multifamily residential, which is intended for single family and multifamily housing between 1 and 3 stories. We are pursuing a rezoning to plan area to give us just a little bit more flexibility from the base RM1 zoning district. This would allow our height to increase by about 3 feet over the 35-foot limit. Also allow our 3rd floor massing to be 100% of the building footprint, and to allow buildings to have a length over 125 feet. The development being proposed includes 94 residential units in a 3-story townhome style product. The units range in size from about 1,300 to 1,700 square feet with a mix of 2 and 3 bedrooms. We also have a 5,600 recreation center at the front of the site with our leasing office. The density is approximately 15.6 dwelling units per acre, which is kind of on the low end of the required 10 to 26 dwelling units per acre. And our building heights are about 38 feet. The goal of our project is to provide high quality homes that are compatible with the surrounding community and complement the natural hillside landscape. Not changing. Here we go. We had some photo simulations prepared to show that what the project would look like from various public locations around the community. So this one is taken from Brickyard Cove Road. And then in this image, you can kind of see our proposed development in the center. We think it really matches the surrounding community in terms of density and height. And this image is taken from the trail behind the project site, which you can also see really has no impact to the existing bay views at that location. The site plan itself has really evolved since our initial proposal was shared with the city. You can see that the once geometric and linear layout is now more natural and organic. We have a curved spine road and angled buildings. We've included a space for a play area, bulb outs along the main access road for additional street trees, enhanced crosswalks for pedestrian safety and connectivity. And we've added seating at various locations where people can take in the views of the bay. And then this is just another closer look at the site plan. So resident parking is provided within the 2-car garages that come with each unit. And then we have guest parking provided along the main access road in front of the recreation building, with a few tucked away at the end of the private drives. We do exceed the city's parking requirement. However, we are looking at opportunities to utilize the Richmond Boardwalk for some potential special event parking. And we'll also require all of our residents to park within their garages to allow all of the guest parking to remain. We've also spent a lot of time with the DRB subcommittee working on architecture. And so you can see the final result at the bottom of the page. Some of the updates have included simplifying materials, looking at earth tone colors instead of kind of the bright whites and blues. We've emphasized the front entries. We've actually ended up lowering the roof lines and pitches a little bit. We've incorporated glass railings and have less emphasis around the window trims. So now our current building materials include shingle roofing, plaster on the ground floor, and then shingles on levels 2 and 3. So that's replaced board and batten, horizontal siding and bricks that we had previously shown. We did want to make sure that all 4 sides of the building were given just as much detail as the front of the building. Along Brickyard Cove Road, the unit that is facing the street, we've incorporated these nice large porch areas to really have a more inviting and residential feel. The recreation building still does include some of the original blue, but we've replaced some of the vertical siding with the shingles to match the current style of the residential building. Typical floor plans include garages on the ground floor, living space on the second, and then bedrooms on the 3rd floor. They also have a minimum of 75 square feet of private open space that's consistent with the RM1 zone. This is another sketch of the project from Brickyard Cove Road. Our current plans do show all of the buildings in the same brown color palette. However, we think we can still refine the colors a little bit more, still complementing the natural hillside, but adding some subtle colors and variations in the elevations. We really liked how this sketch kind of turned out. You can see kind of some muted blues and browns, and a little bit of variation on the materials. And here are some of the color concepts that we prepared after our DRB study session. You can see the current all brown elevation in the top left corner. And then in some of these new versions, we've introduced lighter shades of browns and taupes, and also the muted blue color. Some of the elevations do have one color on the upper levels, and others we've introduced multiple colors. They seem to work well with the bronze windows and wood front doors that the DRB favored. We also welcome any of your input on this design, since you know the community best.
Okay, thank you so
Yes.
much for where you've come thus far. I don't want to interrupt you, and I do
No worries.
apologize for the fact that there isn't the time we thought. But this,
Okay,
we just did this presentation
Yep.
at 6 o'clock.
okay.
So I'm wondering if it mightn't be useful to, and the problem with the presentation, unfortunately, was that the community didn't have very much time or almost any time to respond. So I'm wondering if there's a way we can get to the community's questions.
Yeah, of
Are there
course,
any-
whatever is helpful.
Yeah, Charmaine, I told you I wanted you to run this, but I'm wondering, do you think there's a way we can jump to community questions?
Well, yeah, there are, what I wanted to keep in mind is that there are some people in this group that didn't ever
Correct.
see this presentation. This is the first time that they've shown this presentation to the PRNC. So that's why I asked her to run through it
I
so
understand.
everybody could see the presentation. But if you want to jump to questions, I think it's fine. What we need to do is put a time limit on the number of questions so that we could wrap up. So at what point do you want to wrap up our overall meeting? I think that's what we need to look at.
With apologies, I'd like to know if there's any major objection to going to 9:30, which is a half hour later than anticipated. Sounds like none. Charmaine, are you cool with that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So we
Okay.
can have like 15 minutes of Q&A.
So that gives at least 7 members of the community a couple of minutes, and I see a lot of hands up. And I'm so sorry, Melissa, because the previous meeting was so contentious, or so there were so many unanswered questions that I never actually, quite honestly, believed we would get to this point in this meeting today. So that we would even be including this today, because there was no resolution at the earlier meeting. But I want to be respectful to Charmaine and company, who are very experienced at running these meetings. So let's try to stop screen sharing a little
Sure.
bit
Okay,
and see if we can get to a lot of hands. I'm going to start with Lisa, because she's the vice president. Let her ask her question. And then Lisa, if you would be so kind as to shepherd us through the 2 minutes questions and answers thereafter.
Sure. Yeah, I'll get my timer out. I'll keep us on track.
Ish.
Two-ish. So I just wanted to speak to a number of findings that the community is concerned with around Brickyard Cove. I know there are a couple people on this call that might want to speak kind of as a representative for Brickyard Landing and for Seacliff, given where they live and the closest impact to these developments. So I just want to kind of summarize some of the very significant concerns that people have with this project, given that it is a planned area. And as a planned area, both the DRB, the Design Review Board, and the Planning Commission must find that all required findings that are listed in our zoning ordinance have to be met. And I kind of wanted to focus on them. There's 14 requirements, and there are quite a few that the community believes have not been met and would need to have serious input on. The first of those is concerning the height. So it must be consistent with the general plan, including the height. And that height is measured from the lowest adjacent grade, whether it be man-made or natural. And in this case, the lowest adjacent grade is the property line, which is the natural grade. In this case, the buildings are 60 feet taller, some of them relative to the lowest adjacent grade, which is 25 feet over the 35-foot height maximum in the general plan. So that needs to be addressed as one of the key 14 requirements. Another one is there is no public transit or option even being discussed. And this is finding C in the zoning ordinance. In addition, this project may result in a reduction in transportation service for all modes of travel, so that it may be a detriment to the public health, safety, or welfare, because the 3 new planned residential developments will add 1,000 new residents approximately. And yet there is no safe egress plan in the event of a mandatory evacuation, which nearly happened 1 month ago with the fire at Miller Knox Park. This especially comes into play during the 4 to 6 months of cutting, infill, and grading, with all of the dump trucks and a street sweeper following them, in combination with the trains that routinely block egress via Canal Boulevard for oftentimes 20 to 30 minutes at a time. Thus, we are requesting a construction traffic study, as well as an emergency egress route study and mitigations that will cover not just the construction phase, but in perpetuity for the safety of all residents in Brickyard Cove. The 72 to 88,000 cubic yards of infill will have very significant impacts on surrounding residential and commercial land uses related to traffic, safe and timely egress in the event of a fire or other emergency requiring a mandatory evacuation, dust, noise, sensitive receptors, and general plan compliance with respect to building heights. That's in violation of Part D of the zoning ordinance. They're damaging our infrastructure with the amount of trucks required to drive over both Seacliff Drive and Brickyard Cove Road with these 88 to 72,000, whichever it is, yards of fill. The community needs to see a signed road agreement whereby the city finally takes and assumes full ownership of Brickyard Cove Road as is, and then requires and works with the developer to fix any damage on both roads. And we need to see that in real time. Lastly, the other violation is we have only seen one design, and this is huge. The public has seen no alternatives. So how do we know that there has been creativity in the design and the use of the land that actually would meet the superior requirement of a planned area? And lastly, I want to close with the biggest point that this community has in general, besides views and safety, is we have not seen a proper CEQA analysis that seriously considers project alternatives. This would require a full EIR, not a mitigated neg deck. So we don't believe that the initial study that is sufficient to adequately address the 72 to 88,000 cubic yards of fill and its significant impacts on all of the other things that I mentioned is going to happen if we do not have a proper CEQA analysis and an EIR. And the city has set the precedent on this, because with Terminal 1, with Seacliff, and with the Shea development of Waterline, there was a full EIR in every case. And we are wanting to see that. And in support of that, we want an outside peer review environmental analysis, and that will seriously look and consider at project alternatives. So
Thanks, Lisa.
on a lot there, and that broadly will cover, I think, a lot of the comments from people outside of parking and views and other types of things.
Right. It seems like we were so far away from making anything happen that it seems like I'm quite surprised we're even having this portion of the meeting today. But what I'd like to do is call on Dave and or Megan. They're two separate people, even though they're in the same possibly country.
We are.
Okay.
And we might have similar comments, but she wants her separate time. She's
okay.
She's her own person. So we both live at 101 Seaview Court, which is directly adjacent to the property. It's in between their building 13 and 15 is adjacent to us. Our biggest concern, we are concerned for the road, we're concerned for the dust, but we want to focus on the loss of view. Our property has views mainly to the southwest, and the developer has proposed to take the land and increase it about 15 or maybe a bit higher feet from the current tallest portion of the land next to us, raise it at least 15 feet, and then add 130-foot tall trees directly next to our property, completely blocking the view. Now, they also have 60-foot tall trees, if you don't like the 130-foot tall trees, which also dwarf their property, our property. And I would like that addressed. I would like the property level reduced, ideally to be no higher than the current tallest level, which would reduce the infill, reduce the number of trucks. And I would like to see the trees no higher at maturity than their tallest height of their buildings. That's it for me.
Thanks, Dave. I think we're probably going to have to wrap up. Well, we have another 10 minutes. Let's hear from Megan, and then looks like Jeff's got his hand up.
Hello, thank you for giving me my separate time. Yes, we are married, but we are two separate people.
I didn't mean any, I hope you took no offense. I just thought you were you were out of the country.
No, we're good. So thank you for my time. So just let's start with a number. 88,000 cubic yards of fill. Why the fill? As I've attended all of these meetings, it appears to be purely to improve the views of the construction, to improve the economics of the development, with zero consideration of the neighbors around there and the impact to their property valuations. I'm worried about that. Not just worried, I know it's going to happen, and I'm trying to get my opinion in right now. It will impact our views. About 3/4 of them will be gone because the property will build in front of us next to our neighbors, completely burying us behind buildings. There will be dirt on my house, dirt on my solar panels. It will impact the sun exposure to my yard and solar panels. This will also impact the privacy of our neighbors. In general, it's over the general plan height for the way that this development is zoned. You add the dirt fill, you add the height of the buildings, we are buried behind buildings. Further, the road is privately owned. We pay for that road. There will be damage. That has not been resolved. If it's not resolved, how will the future maintenance of that road be funded by this community? That's not talked about. Also, story poles have not been installed. We really don't know how high this thing's going to be. There's beautiful artist illustrations, and that's it. I'm not buying it. My husband noted the landscaping. The plants that are in the plan can be up to 130 feet. Yes, they may be drought tolerant, but is completely inconsistent with any of the landscaping that you can see in the picture in front of you. Everyone else tries to maintain the views. The developer has chosen landscaping that's not consistent with that. Last but not least, it's 100% rental property. That is also inconsistent with the rest of the community. And the other thing I'd like to have noted is that LUDRC Zoom meeting had details changed at the last minute where many people could not attend. I had to run around to my neighbors and give them the information so they could log in. I had to ask for the telephone number. So my husband, who has been on the Point Richmond Neighborhood Council, I've been on the Point Richmond Neighborhood Council, so we could log in. Totally inappropriate. I understand it was a technical error, but you should not have a conversation without the community. Thank you.
Thanks, Megan. Dave, if you could, thanks. There we go. I just want to see if there are any more hands and then see. I didn't hear a question, so I can't ask the developers to respond to it. We do know that the meeting with the LUDRC is going to be, oh, I'm sorry. Jeff, I'm so sorry. You were up next. We do know that there's going to be another meeting. So this is an in-between step. Go ahead, Jeff.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. I know this is late for everybody. And I just wanted to say, I agree with all of the comments, Lisa's and the last person who spoke, particularly since so many, I had notified everybody at Brickyard Landing, giving them the link to get to this call. And it was done through our agent, and I had no way to follow up with the revised way to get in. So, you know, that earlier meeting really should not have taken place, and neither should this one. It should all be postponed so that everybody in the community can see the plan. But aside from that, just a few things, and I've submitted mine in writing as well. But I'm not going to go over Lisa's great points about why this should not be a planned area district, because it just simply doesn't qualify. But, you know, we've talked about bringing in 88,000. They've cut a little bit off of that. It's going to be massive amount, taking 4 to 6 months just for the fill, the grading, the cut, and so on. And that's going to be disruptive to the community and all of Point Richmond. Anybody who tries to drive any of these roads, these trucks are going to be going back and forth all day long. So that's a huge problem. We've talked about the road conditions, the fill and the cutting taking that long period of time, massive disruption to the community. Plus, you know, the Terminal 1 is talking about 45,000 cubic yards of fill as well. So it's never ending for the community. One of the big challenges we have for Brickyard Landing, and it's very similar to the effect that's happening to Seacliff, but in a way it's more direct. The dirt right now, we're level almost the whole way up the property line, and they're going to fill within the first 275 feet dirt before they start building 29 feet up. I haven't seen the plan from this latest slight concession, but so that's going to be a wall with retaining walls, series of retaining walls that will block the two lower buildings. Then you've got another 35, 36, 37 feet of building on top of that. And it's going to cut light and views for our two lower buildings pretty dramatically. And they've used the existing trees as an example, but light comes through those trees. You can see the view through those trees. It's not the same as having a wall.
Thank you very much, Jeff. I really appreciate it. I do have one more hand up from Karen, and we have 3 minutes. So
okay, I know we'll be back, right?
We're definitely going to be back.
I mean, no, there's not going to be a vote tonight. Is that correct?
No, absolutely not. Some of us are surprised we're here today. So
okay, thank you.
Hi, Philip. Thanks.
Thank you, Karen.
I'll jump in real quick. Something that hasn't been discussed is when they bring all this fill in, they're going to have to actually bring in additional soil to compact that remaining soil. So I would like, as part of, to hear how many loads of additional trucks are going to have to do 4 trips, because they're going to have to not only bring the soil in to compact, but after the lower soil has been compacted, they're going to have to remove that topsoil in additional loads of trucks. So I would like that to be answered as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. For the developers, again, there is not a question here. So you're in the awkward possession of having nothing that you can answer in 3 minutes. But I do want to give you a moment or two to say something, and then we'll have Charmaine comment, and then we'll wrap up.
Sure. So, let's see. We have modified the grading plan, which does show that we are able to reduce our import by about 16,000 cubic yards. We are working closely with the city to ensure that we don't leave any damage to the road. If that does occur, we'll have a pre and post survey of the roads. We're also working diligently with them to try to facilitate the dedication of the remaining portions of Brickyard Cove Road, and we'll work with them on, you know, a fair share contribution to have that work completed. We certainly want to work with the neighbors and address any concerns with any of the trees that we're proposing on site. We do believe that we're meeting the CEQA obligations in terms of the environmental document that the city is processing as the lead agency. And yeah, we'll continue to work with the community. I understand all of your concerns. I'm not really surprised by anything that I've heard. We're really trying to do our best and want to be a good neighbor. And thank you for having us tonight.
Thanks, Melissa. And once again, for everyone, we apologize that this meeting went nothing like they normally do. Charmaine, could you make a comment or two, and then we can all go about our way. I thank everyone, particularly the Brickyard Cove residents who've been on this on Zoom for 3.5 hours, and many really didn't have a chance to speak their mind. Charmaine?
Yes, I want to say thank you to everybody who came to our earlier meeting and to this meeting. As you can see, we have issues in Point Richmond we need to discuss, the community needs to discuss, but for Republic, I'm so happy that you all could come and at least listen to some of the comments that have come up tonight. And I appreciate your input, and I just want to say one thing. In general, everybody understands that we will have development, and we will have development at that site. We're not fighting. I think for the most part, people are not objecting that there's some kind of housing going to go into this big, beautiful lot. It's that we really want to work with you so that, it will conform more to our neighborhood, and our neighbors will be happy to recommend you as a place, that people can come and live. So I want to continue our discussions, and we'll let you know when we can set up another meeting. Thank you so much for coming.
Okay. Thank you, Republic. Thank you, neighbors. I'm going to wrap this up. There are lots of texts coming in suggesting and reminding us that we know that the residents of Brickyard Cove did not have a chance to ask their questions, and consequently, Republic did not have a chance to answer them. So I will say once again, this meeting was not a typical LUDRC meeting, I think, or it was much more complex than expected, nor was this a typical special session. So if necessary, I think both the LUDRC and the PRNC will be happy to have special meetings because this is more than the 30 minutes that is normally allotted, or the 10 minutes that is normally allotted for an LUDRC vote. On a positive note, those of you who belong to the Point Richmond Neighborhood Council have received notices about our candidates forum, which is going to be held on October 3rd, which is this coming Monday at the elementary school at Washington. we'll enter on East Richmond on the back of the school into the auditorium. We encourage you to attend, and we encourage you to share that invitation by email or by voice with your friends. It's a very comprehensive candidates forum and debate with a series of questions, debate style and in forum style. We think it will be the most comprehensive of all of them. It will be live translated into Spanish if anyone requests it. And that will be at approximately from 6 to 7. We'll hear from our District 2 candidates. And then approximately from 7 to 9, we'll hear from the 4 candidates for mayor. So once again, my personal apologies for this not being the smoothest meeting in history. And I promise to try to do better with a little more preparation next time. And I thank you all for joining. Do I have to move to Charmaine? Do we have to move to call
Motion
this
to
meeting?
close.
A motion to close.
Second.
Good night,
We can
everybody.
say goodnight now. Thank you, everyone. Okay, good night.
And how was your battery?
Yeah, still got 60%. Oh, Daniel Butt's on.